We are a life science focused technology company. Our entire management team is filled with industry veterans. We come from the life science space, instrumentation, informatics. I've been in this space for about 25 years myself, between Boston and India. We are headquartered in Massachusetts, but we do have offices, fairly significant offices in Mumbai and Pune. Scitara DLX, as we call our platform, has become the leading integration platform for the life science industry. In about 18 months since we've launched the platform, we now have 10 of the top 25 global pharma companies deploying our platform. We have several companies that have now gone into production across multiple sites. Today, we'll also talk a little bit about some of the AI-driven capabilities. I actually want to thank Dr. Roy for helping us provide that launch pad. He talked about integration and collaboration. Our platform is all about that. He talked about Gen AI. We'll talk how Gen AI is being implemented. We also talked about equipment integration. That's the crux of what we build. Over to you.
Talk about this.
It's critical that Scitara DLX carry the entire ecosystem. Revvity Signals is a strategic partner, and what that means is we are very well embedded into the Signals platform. We actually have some large Signals customers in Europe and now in the US who are deploying these joint technologies. On the connected side, part of what we do is we carry the ecosystem. Our goal is to integrate and connect with every endpoint in the lab, whether it's a device, whether it's an instrument, whether it's an application, whether it's the huge number of files that you have to deal with. Our motto is no instrument or application left behind.
Thanks, Ajit. So let's get started with what Scitara DLX is. Now, on the bottom pane here, you would see we have drawn some instruments, and some of you might be able to relate to it. We have taken a sample of simple devices, chromatography systems, plate readers, bioreactors, legacy systems. And most of you would have seen or worked with some of these instruments, and it's kind of a representative sample. Now, what are the challenges today that we have seen or we have observed? There's a huge variety, and there are a lot of instruments that need to be integrated into your enterprise systems. And on the other hand, we also have systems like ELNs, like Revvity Signals, LIMS companies like Labware, LabVantage, and the like, which could be on-prem or which could be sitting somewhere in the cloud. And the data needs to be collected from these instruments and sent back to, let's say, Signals, right? Now, it's not to say that integrations don't exist. They do exist in some shape and form, but it's hard to maintain those integrations, and once you integrate it, the data remains in some silo, and you will kind of create multiple silos, and that's the challenge that we are trying to solve here. So what is Scitara DLX doing? We literally want to sit in the middle of your entire instrument landscape, right? And we call ourselves data plumbers. We literally call ourselves plumbers. And what we do is we take the data from different instruments, different enterprise systems, and what to do with it, I'll get into that in a minute. We also recognize that, so before that, what we do is we build a connector for each and every endpoint that exists in your lab. It could be an instrument, it could be a benchtop instrument, it could be an enterprise software like Empower, Chromeleon, or it could be some system that is on the cloud. It could be an ERP, it could be an MES, it could be a LIMS system. So we will build connectors to each and every endpoint. And we also recognize that some of your endpoints are sitting or buried in like your level 1 and level 2 labs. How do I get the data out of that lab and bring it back into DLX, right? So we have some tools and utilities that will do this in a much simpler fashion. We reduce the whole network configuration, and we add a layer of security for routing the data into DLX. So what are we trying to do here? We are trying to be the one normalized interface to all the lab assets that are there in your enterprise. All of these assets will be connected to Scitara DLX. And our goal and vision is take the variety, take the heterogeneity that exists in the lab today and replace it with something that is more standardized, something that is more modern, something that is more accessible. So that the data can actually flow into the systems that actually need it, and the value your enterprises will gain value from that. So connectivity is our core value proposition. So once you have data into your system, what do you do with it? So the most logical thing to do after the connectivity problem was solved was automation. How can I get the data to flow through the system seamlessly? And that's the first step that we built on, which is DLX orchestrations. It's running live in many customer accounts, and we have some good use cases to show. So let's take an example of orchestrations. And before I get into orchestrations, what are orchestrations? Orchestrations are nothing but workflows that you have in your day-to-day life. We will take those workflows and using a low-code, no-code platform, we'll create those workflows in DLX. That workflow will have obviously a starting point. We call it a trigger. A trigger could be something like, hey, I want to start this workflow today, right now. Or a workflow could be, I want this workflow to start maybe 6 a.m. in the morning or midnight. Or a workflow could be some event happens in your instrument landscape. Maybe a sample set has been processed and the result needs to be fetched. Or a file has been created from an instrument and that now needs to be looked at, right? So we have different triggers, and using those triggers, we'll act on those triggers. So orchestration is going to act on those triggers. It is going to perform various steps in the workflow. And steps could be also of different types. I don't want to get into the details. We can check that. And I want to give you one example. Through Signals, what have we done? So in Signals, Signals lets you to integrate different other external systems. So we have a hook there through external actions, and I want to demonstrate through screenshots what we did here. So let's say as a scientist, you have created a sample table in one of the tables in Signals. You have put all the basic information in that Signals table, and you want to create a sample set out of it and create a sample set in Empower. So we'll invoke DLX through that hook on the right-hand side that you see. A DLX orchestration is launched, wherein you will log in, because we can't, there are two ways to do this. Orchestrations are either fully autonomous, meaning there is no user intervention required, or depending on the workflow, you can also have some user interactivity here. So this example is an example where we want to show you a user can also interact with a DLX orchestration. He'll put in a username, password, he'll select which Empower connection I want to engage with. He'll select a project that the sample set needs to be created. And then we take the data that has come from Signals and we'll make it editable, and we can add more data. This is just a representative. There could be many more sample IDs, sample lines that can be there in this template. So you can make changes on the go. And then after that, you click a button and the sample set will show up in Empower. You see the yellow highlighted one. So what happened behind the scenes is there's an orchestration trigger. We fetched data from Signals. We took that data. There could be some massaging that is required. And that's the function transform logic, where there might be, before the data needs to reach to the next step, some massaging needs to be done. So we have a lot of flexible tool set. We can achieve a lot of data transformation using some of these things. User interactivity, that's the user input. And then after that, we go and push that data into Empower. And after that Empower data is there, we can also take a pointer from Empower and then feed it back into Signals. So that's how we can trace the entire thing from Signals and have something, have a pointer back into Signals. So that completes a round trip. So this is one example of a DLX orchestration through Signals, which we wanted to highlight.
So orchestrations are low code, no code. We also provide the ability for people to write their own scripts for complex orchestrations. Particularly many of the young scientists that we are dealing with in the biotech industry use a lot of Python. So we have both Python as well as JavaScript support. We're creating this concept of a citizen developer for many people who sort of want to sort of be in this space.
Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk about is with orchestrations. Now we have the data, we have orchestrated your data, we have created workflows in the lab. Next thing we are focusing is AI. What to do with AI. We don't want to be left behind. AI is a reality. It's going to become even more deeply entrenched into our life. So what are we doing with, we call our product DLX Strands, and that's completely AI driven. So whenever you are building a product, we have 3 user personas. The first one is obviously the IT. Since this was an integration platform, there's a lot of IT user persona that we have to deal with. But then as and when we have started building the product, it has come to our notice that users also need some features. They need more interactivity. So the researcher, which is the lab scientist, is a critical part of this whole user journeys here. And the last one is the management. How do they get access to the data? How do they get a bird's eye view of everything that's happening in the lab? So with these 3 personas, I have some sample use cases that I can show. This is an animation, and I have some real sample also. So let's say Ajit mentioned about the citizen developer or a person requiring to create a workflow. So instead of going to that workflow editor and creating everything from scratch, what if there is a prompt? What if there is a prompt where you can say, hey, create a new workflow with these inputs? So this is the step we are taking, and we want to make the whole job of that designer easier, right? So he will prompt you with what all triggers you want to create, what all connections you want to integrate, and based on those prompts and based on your answers, an orchestration will be completely created. It will be pushed into a system where you can actually test and verify whether everything is working. This is another example, like, a lab scientist, when he walks in every morning, he'll probably want to see, what does he need to do that day. So what if there is a prompt which says that, what samples are there for my analysis today? What do I need to work on today? And what if I'm able to kind of probe signals and get the data that is already created and kind of give you a response that, there are these 5 samples. These 5 samples have to be analyzed in so and so manner. These SOPs have to be referred. And we'll also be able to get the information from the SOPs, and I'll also give you a context of, this is what you need to do as part of this particular experiment. This is one more example where we want to show the power of AI strands for the management or a lab manager. So let's say you want to query a status of a particular bioreactor that is there in the lab. So this is AI strands, by the way. So you can ask your question.
This is all possible because we are now connected into the entire lab ecosystem, right? Without that connectivity, something like Gen AI or strands that we call is not possible.
Yeah. So what's happening behind the scenes is it asked, what is the status of a bioreactor? Bioreactor is a connection in our system, and that connection is already configured. So it is going and probing that, firstly, is this connection there? Which means, you can't say bioreactor 10,000 and it will say, this doesn't exist. So we are actually probing the status of that particular connection. We are getting some runtime parameters and showing it over here. You can also say that if this pH is more than 7.5, why don't you send me an alert? So what's going to happen behind the scenes is it's actually going to create another orchestration, taking your command as if pH is greater than 7.5, create an orchestration, add an email notification step. This user requested it, so send an email notification to that particular user. So this is a natural language interface to query and interact with your lab assets. So that's AI stands for you. The next up is DLX workspaces. So I mentioned this is a integration platform, which means a lot of back-end work is happening. But as and when the feedback that we are getting from our customers was they need a better way to interact with this system, and DLX workspaces was born because of that. So let's say there's a weight measurement to be taken, and the user just needs to not be bothered by other things that are there. They don't need to be bothered by how do I get to that point. Why don't I just give that point directly to the user so that he can open up a workspace and say, this is something that is waiting for me, click a button, and then he completes the task and is done with that. So supporting nonlinear workflows is what we want to achieve here. It also is a great tool to give you like a dashboard and cockpit functionality where a workspace can be created where you can just go and hit a refresh and it will tell you the status of what's happening in your lab. So let me give you some examples. So this is one example where the same thing, OPC status, you can create a workspace which will have this OPC dashboard already set up. There's a workspace designer where you can have all those visual elements. There's a canvas, you can drag and drop things on there, and then you can wire up your lab assets to each of those UI elements. So in this case, there is a chart here. The chart is going to plot whatever the OPC readings are going to be extracted from that connection.
All these things that you do, whether it's in workspace or in orchestrations, you can then save into and create your own library. So, and the product also comes with significant number of library items itself. So you don't have to do anything from scratch.
Another example is, let's say, as a scientist, you want to capture some measurements of a particular sample, right? So you can go to that benchtop station. Maybe you can, if there is a sample barcode, you can scan that sample barcode, and you want to say that I want to take a reading of that particular sample. You can set the weight. This is one example where this is a weight measurement, but it could be anything. It could be take a pH reading, or it could be any other thing. So a workspace has been created. You scan a sample barcode, and then you take a reading, and then you populate it back into signals. So this is a very custom view. It's a very purpose-driven application. You can create multiple such widgets for your interactivity and your dashboarding. And what's really happening, as Ajit alluded, the magic is really in the backend. The magic is because we have the connectivity layer. We want to kind of abstract you from all the details of how to integrate a particular instrument. We have a library. We have native connectors for each of these things. And all you need to do is just configure that particular connection for that particular instrument or endpoint, and you get going. Last tab that I want to talk about is fair data. So we started out with collecting data. Then we did transformation through orchestrations. We gave you a way to interact better. And now that the data is now coming into our system, there's also an ask from the enterprise world, or even the IT world, that how do I access this data? How do I access this data in a format that is more standardized? So by default, everything that is captured in our system is native JSON, but there could be a need that this data needs to be transformed into, let's say, allotrope format or animal format. So we'll build those converters also, and then this data can be accessible, findable, and this is a step in getting into the fair data strategy. So we have a thing about, we implemented a feature called execution labels. So as the data is coming into our system, we can have the user define a label, or the system can also put a label automatically. So let's say it could be a lab, it could be a site that you're working with, it could be an instrument, it could be a sample set name, it could be all that metadata, that rich metadata that is required for you to go back and find out what happened, can be collected in one place, and we can create a data stream, as we are calling it right now. And that data stream can be made available for your other enterprise apps that depend on it. So we can take this data and then through our connectors to, let's say, a Snowflake or S3, or it could be Amazon Redshift, whatever you have, we can build connectivity out there and then send the data out to those data lakes of your choice. You may also choose that some subset of this data needs to go back into Signals. That is also easily possible. So these are I wanted to leave you guys with this. On the bottom half, we have the connectivity. Then we have orchestrations for data transformation automation. We have workspaces for better interactivity. We have fair data for the data accessibility, and we have Strands, that's the native AI that we are working on.
Just one thing I want to add, Dr. Roy talked about Aadhaar as being the glue for the digital transformation in India. If you think about our fair data strategy, right? So every data element or every endpoint or every transaction is now being labeled or will be labeled. So you will, those label items kind of represent your Aadhaar in your lab. And this is how you put all of this together.
So this is our last slide. Ajit, you want to take this?
Sure. So, and I think David has talked about it, Ralph has talked about it. When we got together, they clearly, as a joint solution, we bring a lot of value. We don't do what Revvity does. Revvity doesn't do what we do, right? We are the underlying integration and connectivity layer, and we enable systems and products like Signals, so that you can accelerate the work that you do.
So thank you. I know this was a short session, but we are here all day outside in the booth, so we'll be happy to answer any queries, or we can also show you some demos also, if you like. Thanks.